Welcome back to our course on PSE 15. In this section we're going to continue looking at the editor and in particular at expert editing, and we're going to look at panels. We've already seen a few panels in use in the course, and if you look at the buttons at the bottom right hand corner of this workspace, you can see a way of showing and hiding a number of different panels. So for example, if I wanted to show the effects panel, I click on effects and up comes the effects panel, which is a pretty typical panel of a certain type. You'll see that it's fixed to the right hand side of the screen. I can hide it again using the same button, and in fact I can show and hide panels using options on the window menu. So if I click on window, note how effects is ticked. I can hide it just by clicking on effects. I can also use that keyboard shortcut there, F2. Now the effects panel is hidden. The top right of the panel includes a contextual menu. Exactly what's there will depend on the panel. Quite typically you have a link through to help. You are often given an option like the size of the thumbnails that you want to view, and in this case, for example, amongst the options that are specific to this panel, the very lowest one there, hide names. The effects that are shown in the panel, you can hide the names or you can show the names. And these effects are categorized, and to select the category you use a little list at the top here. So currently we have faded photo. If I wanted to try textures, click on textures and the effects associated with textures are shown. So that's a pretty typical panel. You probably noticed just now that the list of panels on the window menu was a much longer list than the number of buttons at the bottom right of the screen there. You access the others using the drop down to the right of the More button. And as you can see, there are about 8 other panels you can access. And these are completely different in how they work from the effects panel. And I'm going to choose histogram. The difference here is that the histogram panel and the others that are grouped with it. Note the tabs here, there's the info panel, navigator, etc. The difference is that these panels float. And when you're working on an image, you can click and drag on the header of this panel and you can move it around the image and position it somewhere that's convenient for what you need to do. One of these floating panels, one that's particularly helpful, is the info panel, because this shows you information based on where in the image you have the cursor at the moment. So for instance, if I hover over the cyclist, I'm given an RGB color code there, web color codes. The inches there indicate the XY coordinates of the cursor. And as I move around the image, the information is updated as I move. So the info panel works in a completely different way and serves a completely different function to, for example, the effects panel. Now I'm not going to go into these individual panels in great detail because most of them we're going to be looking at during the balance of the course, but let me just make some other general points. If I wanted to close just the info panel and leave those other floating panels open, there is a little menu, top right hand corner of the floating panel group there. I can just say close and that will close just the info panel. To open it again, I have only to go up to the window menu and click on info again, and it's added back into that group. If I want to close the whole group, there's either the close tab group or there's a little close button on the floating panel itself. Let me open that group up again. This time I'm going to go for color swatches. With the color swatches option, as with a couple of the other panels in that floating group, the amount of space needed is really quite large, so you can actually stretch the group down. And of course with some of the other panels this is the case as well. So for instance, if you look at the history panel that we've seen already, although with this particular image I only have open at the moment, if I'd done a lot of operations, of course the list in the history panel might be quite long and I may need to resize that. Let me now close that group By default, when you're working in expert editing in PSE 15, you are using what's called the basic workspace, and the basic workspace is what we've been looking at so far. There is an alternative workspace called the custom workspace, and I'm going to go into that workspace now and explain briefly what the custom workspace involves. If I go back down to that More button at the bottom right hand corner, one of the other options, the bottom option there, is custom workspace. And if I go into custom workspace, certain things change, one of which is that all of those panel buttons have gone, and in fact now all of the available panels can be floated. If, for example, I take the effects panel, let me click on the top here for effects. It seems to have exactly the same controls, etc., that I was looking at just now. But if I click on effects, I can drag it away, release the mouse, and it becomes a floating effects panel. And again, if I want to put it somewhere more convenient for my work, I can move it around. At any time, I can drag it back up to join the others. But I could also, for example, drag out the filters panel. Do the same thing. Perhaps make it taller to accommodate those filters. And if I wanted to combine filters and effects together, this is something that takes a little bit of practice, but I'm going to drag filters onto effects, but I'm going to drag it in such a way that you see a sort of blue background to the right of where it says effects, and then these two will be joined with the tabs lining up. So I'm just going to put it there. You see that blue background? Now you've got effects and filters joined together. But if I also wanted to join styles, I might join styles in a different way. So I'll drag it away to make a styles floating panel. This time I might, for example, hang it off the bottom of the other panel. In the custom workspace, you can rearrange the floating panels in pretty much any combination that you like. And particularly if you're doing detailed work, that can be a very useful thing to be able to do. If I want to drag these back, let's say I want to put styles back, drag it back up there, etc. Put that one back up there. So it's pretty easy to put things back as they were. And at any time, of course, I can switch back to being the basic workspace anyway, and then everything goes back to the way it was before. And the very last thing to tell you about panels at the moment is this. Let's suppose you're working, say, using the effects panel, and you really like this lizard skin effect. If I right click on that effect, one of the options is add to favorites. And there is a favorites panel. It's one of the floating panels. Let's just look at favorites. I've already got some favorites on there, but lizard skin is the one I've just added. If you have a mixture of effects, styles, graphics and so on that you use quite a bit, you can add them to your favorites, and it gives you a single convenient place to find those effects, styles, etc. that you use a lot. And at any time, if I wanted to remove one of these because it was no longer a favorite, right click, remove from favorites, and you can maintain your favorites panel in that way. That's it on panels for the moment. I'll see you in the next section.